My mother told me my father died before I was born, but he showed up at my wedding with his new family. I've tried to start this 100 different ways, but no matter how many times I rewrite the first sentence, it still feels surreal to see it in black and white. My mother told me my father died before I was born. Before I continue, ensure to subscribe, like, and drop a comment too. I grew up believing that. I grieved a man I never met. I imagined him in all the blank spaces of my childhood, sitting in the audience at my school recitals, walking me down the aisle someday, telling me he was proud of me. And then he showed up at my wedding, live, with his new family. Even now, months later, I can still feel the way my stomach dropped when I saw him. Like someone had kicked out the floor under my feet and left me falling through nothing. I suppose I should start at the beginning. My mother was always careful about what she said about my father. Or maybe careful isn't the right word, she was vague, evasive. When I was little, I asked her what he looked like, and she would just say, "You have his eyes." When I asked why there were no pictures, she'd get this tight look around her mouth and say she'd thrown them away because it hurt too much to keep them. When I asked how he died, she'd sigh and say, "It was an accident." That was it. No details. No stories. No memories she was willing to share. When you're a kid, you don't know what you don't know. You just accept that some doors are locked and you're not supposed to knock. But as I got older, the emptiness around him started to feel like a wound. In high school, we had to fill out a family tree for biology class, and I remember staring at the blank space under father for an hour, my pencil hovering over the paper. I asked her again that night if she'd tell me more about him. She shook her head and said, "He was gone before you were born. That's all you need to know." I thought she was protecting herself. Or me. Or both of us. And for a long time I let it go. I grew up. Went to college. Met Ethan, who would eventually become my husband. He asked about my father once, early in our relationship. I told him the same story I'd been told. My father died before I was born. I said it calmly, like it was just a fact. But inside I felt that same old ache. He kissed my forehead and said he was sorry. We never talked about it again. Planning the wedding was bittersweet because of it. There were so many moments that reminded me of what I didn't have. Choosing someone to walk me down the aisle, filling out the forms that listed father of the bride. Each time I felt the same little pang. But nothing prepared me for what actually happened. The ceremony was beautiful. Small, intimate, exactly what I wanted. I was standing in the receiving line with Ethan, smiling so much my face hurt when I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, holding hands with a woman I didn't recognize. 2 teenage kids hovered behind them, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. He was older than I'd imagined. His hair was mostly gray, and there were deep lines around his eyes. But when he looked at me, something in my chest seized. 'Cause I knew. Even before he opened his mouth. Even before he said my name. He knew. My mother had always said I had his eyes. And looking at him, I finally understood what she meant. I didn't hear what Ethan said. I didn't feel his hand on my back. All I could hear was the rushing in my ears, like the sound of waves. The man stepped closer. "Claire," he said softly. "I'm your father." I don't remember dropping my bouquet, but I must have, because later someone handed it back to me. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. He tried to reach for me and I flinched. The woman beside him put a hand on his arm. "Maybe this isn't the right moment," she said gently. I turned and walked away. I didn't even look at Ethan. I went straight to the bridal suite, locked the door behind me, and sank onto the little velvet love seat, my heart slamming so hard I thought I might faint. There were voices outside the door. Ethan, my maid of honor, my mother, but I couldn't process any of it. I kept replaying it in my head. "I'm your father." Over and over like a broken record. After a few minutes there was a soft knock. "Claire." It was Ethan. "Please let me in." I unlocked the door and he slipped inside, closing it quietly behind him. He sat next to me and took my hand. "Do you want me to ask them to leave?" he asked. I shook my head numbly. "I need to talk to my mother," I whispered. He nodded. "I'll get her." When she came in, she looked older than I'd ever seen her. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then I said very quietly, "You told me he was dead." She closed her eyes and 2 tears slipped down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "Why?" Her voice was so soft I almost couldn't hear it. "Because I thought it was better if you believed that." "Better for who?" "Yes." She looked at the floor. "For both of us," she said finally. I felt something twist inside me, something sharp and ugly. "You lied to me my whole life," I whispered. She didn't deny it. She just pressed her hand to her mouth like she was trying not to sob. I stood up, my legs unsteady. "I can't do this right now," I said. "Claire." "No." I turned and walked out before she could say anything else. The rest of the reception was a blur. I plastered a smile on my face, took photos, thanked guests. But every time I glanced toward the corner where he'd been standing, my chest tightened. He didn't stay long. I watched him walk out with his new family. His shoulders slumped. I wondered what he'd told them about me. Or if he'd told them anything at all. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the milestones I'd spent wishing he was there. Graduation. My first job. Every birthday. Every time I'd looked up at the sky and whispered, "I miss you," to a man who wasn't even dead. I thought about all the years I'd spent feeling incomplete. And all the lies my mother had told to keep me that way. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I called the number he'd left with Ethan. When he answered, his voice cracked. "Claire," he said. "Thank you for calling." I didn't know what to say. There were 1,000 questions, all tangled up in my throat. Finally, I asked the only one that mattered. "Why?" There was a long silence. "I don't know how much your mother told you," he began. "She told me you were dead," I said flatly. He made a small broken sound. "I left before you were born," he said. "It wasn't. I wasn't ready. I thought I'd ruined her life. I thought you'd be better off without me." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "And you never thought to reach out?" "I tried," he whispered. "For years. She sent everything back. Letters. When you were 5, I tried to see you. She threatened to call the police." Closed my eyes. "I should have tried harder," he said. "But I was a coward. And then, I don't know. Time passed. It felt like it was too late." I swallowed hard. "Why come to my wedding?" "Because I couldn't stand the idea that you'd think I didn't care," he said. "I just wanted you to know I was alive." I didn't have an answer to that. After a moment he said, "I know I have no right to ask. But if you ever want to talk, I'll be here." I hung up without saying goodbye. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the floor of my living room, trying to make sense of a life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call him. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there, listening to the clock tick on the wall, wondering what else I'd never know. The days that followed unfolded in slow, muted spirals, like I was trapped in a dream that refused to end. One of those cruel, half-lit limbos where nothing made sense, and even the most mundane details seemed distorted. I went through the motions of my new marriage. Smiling when Ethan spoke, making coffee in the mornings, answering the well-wishing texts that trickled in from friends and extended family. But it was as if my consciousness had peeled away from my body and was floating somewhere just above me, watching, observing, aching silently in a grief I hadn't yet given myself permission to feel. Because how do you grieve something you never had? Or worse, something you were told was gone long before you even had a chance to miss it? I didn't speak to my mother for a week. Every time I saw her name pop up on my phone screen, a knot of emotion, rage, betrayal, disbelief, twisted tighter in my chest until the mere act of seeing her contact photo felt like an insult. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses again, wasn't ready to be gaslit into believing this wasn't as cruel as it felt. The silence wasn't petty. It was survival. If I heard her voice too soon, I was afraid I'd crumble under the weight of all the years I'd spent feeling like something vital was missing from me, only to find out she'd deliberately kept it from me, kept him from me, as though I didn't deserve to know where I came from, who I was. At night, when the apartment was quiet and Ethan had drifted off beside me, I found myself reliving not just the moment at the wedding. His face in the crowd, the stunned silence, the trembling confession, but the endless series of childhood moments that suddenly carried new weight, new pain. The Father's Day projects I brought home from school that she told me to give to Grandpa instead. The way she'd always changed the subject when I asked what I inherited from him. The way she'd never corrected the whispers of sympathy from other parents, or the stories I crafted about the tragic car crash that never happened. Stories she allowed me to believe because it was easier than telling me the truth. But what truth was she even protecting me from? That he was alive. That he'd made a mistake and left. That he'd built a new life, loved other children, while I sat at birthday parties imagining a dead man in a grave somewhere he'd never been buried. One night, I sat in the dim light of our kitchen, phone in hand, and finally did the thing I had avoided for days. I looked him up. His name, his address, the company he worked for. It was all there like he'd never disappeared at all. There were pictures, too. Public social media profiles, smiling family photos. His new wife, their 2 teenage kids. A whole world that had gone on without me, with no place carved out for the daughter he had once created and then left behind. I stared at a particular photo. Him holding a birthday cake for his son, their faces side by side, smiling with the ease of people who had always known each other. There was no awkwardness, no grief, no distance. Just warmth, familiarity, history. All the things I never got. All the things I'd had to imagine while being told none of it was possible. I felt a deep ache in my chest, one that made it hard to breathe, and I remember whispering to no one. Why wasn't I good enough? I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get one. But the question lingered like fog in my throat, and I knew I wouldn't be able to swallow it until I said it to his face. So I made the decision that I wasn't sure I would ever be ready for. I called him again. This time he answered on the first ring like he had been waiting, hoping, every second since the last time we spoke. Claire, he said, and there was something so fragile in the way he said my name, like it was both a miracle and a curse, that I had to take a full breath before I could speak. I want to see you, I said, my voice calm but hollow. Face to face. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask when. He just said, whenever you're ready. We agreed to meet at a park halfway between our homes, a quiet stretch of green space by the water where families walked dogs and joggers moved through the trails like ghosts in the background of other people's lives. I wore neutral colors, as though I didn't want to give anything away about how I was feeling. I showed up early and sat on a bench under a sycamore tree, watching the wind move through the branches like it might blow away the uncertainty swelling inside me. When he arrived, I almost didn't recognize him without the wedding chaos surrounding him. Just a man, standing there in a sweater and jeans, holding a coffee cup like it could shield him from the enormity of the moment. He approached cautiously, his hands visible, like he didn't want to spook me. Thank you, he said quietly as he sat down beside me, leaving just enough space between us to make it clear that he wasn't sure if he was welcome. I didn't speak for a long time. I just stared at the water. I don't know where to begin, he said finally. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but I want to tell you the truth. All of it. I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I didn't just see the man from the wedding. I saw the man I might have known if things had gone differently. The man I had spent my entire life mourning without ever knowing what kind of person he was. Then talk, I said. Start from the beginning. And he did. He told me everything. About how he and my mother met young, how they fell fast and hard, how she got pregnant and he panicked. He told me he wasn't proud of who he was back then. How he thought he was doing the noble thing by walking away when he realized he couldn't be the kind of father I deserved. How he tried at first to stay involved, to co-parent, to be in my life. But every time he reached out, my mother shut the door a little tighter. She made it clear I wasn't welcome, he said. And after a while, I believed her when she said you were better off without me. I listened, my arms crossed tightly. Not because I didn't want to believe him, but because I didn't know what belief would even mean anymore. The damage had already been done. The years had already passed. I couldn't get them back, and neither could he. I never stopped wondering, he said, his voice cracking. Every year on your birthday I'd think about calling, about driving to your town. But I told myself it wasn't my place. That if you wanted to know me, you'd find me. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat and looked away. Except I didn't even know you were alive. He blinked hard like the weight of those words physically hurt him. I know, he said. And I'm sorry. For every second of that. We sat in silence again, the wind tugging at the hem of my coat. I could feel the weight of everything he wasn't saying pressing between us. The guilt, the regret, the broken years, the quiet admissions that nothing could ever fully repair the wound he'd left behind. I don't know what you want from me, I said finally. If you're looking for redemption or forgiveness or some chance to start over, I don't know if I can give you that. I'm not asking for anything, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I just want to know you now, if that's something you're willing to allow. I can't change the past, but I can be here now if you'll let me. And there it was, the one thing I hadn't prepared for. The idea that this wasn't about repairing the past, but about choosing what came next. I didn't answer him right away. I didn't have an answer. But for the first time in my life, I had the option of choosing something. Of defining my relationship with my father on my terms. Not through the lens of grief or anger or abandonment, but through cautious curiosity and the possibility, however faint, of building something new from the ashes of what had been lost. I didn't forgive him that day. I didn't hug him or call him dad or pretend that anything had been healed. But I didn't walk away either. And that, for me, was the beginning of something I didn't yet know how to name. Because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, tentative, and shaped like two people sitting on a park bench, learning each other's stories for the very first time.